Hey, good afternoon and good morning, and whatever time of day it is for you, wherever you're at. Thanks for taking the time to hop on today and be a part of our webinar here. We're going to go ahead and jump into some different topics here this morning, and as you are aware of, if you've got the email message of how you signed up for this, we're going to be doing these every couple of weeks. And the idea with these is, again, kind of like what we did back in December, is just short little webinars, just trying to highlight some different parts and pieces. You know, some of it may be repeats for you, but maybe other portions of it will be like, oh, a little tidbit you could take with you and apply as you go along the way. I'm just going to start off just with a real quick poll here that I'll launch here, and you should be seeing now. And really, it's just to give us some feedback as we do a couple more of these sessions coming up in the next weeks of things that you would find helpful, areas that are on the top of your mind of things that you'd like to cover. Maybe I'll just give you an opportunity to just throw some bullet points. You don't have to be overly descriptive, but maybe just throw in a few areas that you would like to see covered in the coming weeks, and we'll look to see if we can apply those. So I'll give you just a few moments more. No, not giving you a ton of time to answer that, but just give you a few minutes more or a few moments more here to just throw in some bullet points, things that you'd like to see, and we'll review those after the session. As we finish that up, I'll also draw your attention to the Q&A section. So this would be more applicable even to this session right now, where you can ask questions, and that can be to things that we're talking about right now in the session, or really if there's just something that you wanted to touch on. It's like, oh, hey, I've wondered about this. Jacob's here as well, one of our support guys, and he can answer some of those things live for you, just typing back and forth. And also, if some of them seem applicable to the entire audience, we'll go over those as well. So that's one of the benefits of joining up here into the webinar in a live format, is getting some back and forth interaction as well. All right, so I'm gonna, if you're still typing something, maybe just for whatever you got, just pop that into your answers there, and I'm gonna close down this poll and we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so gonna jump in today with, actually, I've kind of titled this this section today is kind of the slightly buried tools and features. So some things that are maybe not so front and center, maybe things that are you'd have to dig a little bit more to find, and just want to make you aware of them. Depending on what your workflow is, they might be useful to you. So jumping first over into the Plan tab. And I'm going to just even come over to, say, to a little roof area that we've drawn in here. And that's just a little shortcut key that's available when it regards to segment lines. So if I come to a segment line here and I've got one drawn in and I want this to be a multiple plies. So of course we could right click on that and we could come here to plies and set it to whatever is appropriate. But another thing that's available to you, a shortcut key, is if you have a numbers pad on your keyboard, so that 10 keypad off to the right-hand side, the plus and the minus button on that would allow you to select a particular segment. So like I've done here, this one, and I've hit the plus button, then it will just add apply on for me, and I can continue to toggle that up to 2 or 3 or 4, all the way even up to 7. So just a handy way to be able to move through some things quickly. Quick note about hotkeys. I'd encourage you, if you're in, we're not really going to talk about hotkeys today, but I just wanted to make a note about that. If you're going to leverage hotkeys like the plus and the minus button, it's something that you would want to be able to do with a single hand. As I sometimes sit in a training class and we're trying to teach and show people how to use the hotkeys. I'll sometimes see somebody, they'll go to use a hotkey and they use 2 hands to do it. It's kind of like they put their mouse down and they go and use the hotkey. And it's like, well, okay, that's, in some ways, that's not going to really save you a whole lot of time. So if you're going to be using hotkeys, I encourage you to use them that you can have one hand on the keyboard, one hand on the mouse. That way you're actually kind of able to, without breaking your flow interruption, you're able to get to what you need to. One other little hotkey type of tool would relate, is less commonly used, but something perhaps you might find useful in certain cases, is the M tool, which brings up the magnifier. So if you're in the digitizer area and you have the digitizer selected, if you hit the M as in Mike key on your keyboard, you'll actually pop up this little magnifier. So you can use it and you can actually zoom in and out a little bit in it, and you can zoom in on a particular area without actually having to go deep into the plan. And I'm not aware of too many people who actually use it on a regular basis, but again, depends on your flow and your work style. Maybe something that'd be useful to you. Jumping into a few of the custom shape options that are available. You might remember a few sessions ago that we talked about presets, and you have these little triangle options here with presets you create. That's great options there that you can get into with presets. But what I wanted to touch on was some other areas where we have these little triangles show up that really aren't related to presets. They're really just related to other options that you might use. So for example, let's say you had a page that you wanted to do a crop on a page for whatever reason. Maybe you just wanted like this section of the page to be a page on its own, don't have any of these extra things. That might be you could do the create page as crop button, like right up here. You could do that, but it might be difficult for you to get everything boxed out with the square. Starting to still get some of these pieces and everything. So what you can do instead is if you right click on here, you can choose to custom shape crop. So I'm going to choose this, and this allows me to actually just trace around the areas that I want to include in my page. So now here I've just kind of boxed out specifically that area. Could do an L shape, or you crop around pretty nicely anywhere. Right click to end it, and now I've got a page that has just that information on it. But the main point is that you can, if you use the crop as new page feature, you can right click and you can actually get a custom shape to do that. Following the same venture, and this is perhaps more useful across multiple different spaces, would be using that same concept in the framing layout area. So I'm going to jump over here to a roof that I've drawn in, a little hand cut roof. And this is a perfect example or a situation where you may want to use this. So we've drawn in the whole area, right, to get our framing layout. And if I use the standard capture tool, so if I come down here and I come to box around it, I'm still going to be getting some of these words down in this lower left-hand corner. And it's, so if I was looking for a really clean look, even if I go really tight, I'm still kind of getting parts and pieces of it. So again, an option I have is, since I have this little triangle here, I can right click on it and I can find that there is a custom shape framing layout option. So in this case, I can just trace around the area. And so then when I get to those words down there, I can just cut around them so that what I'm actually capturing is only my framing layout. And so then I'll call this framing. And there we go. We've got that, no extra words in it. Got a nice clean layout that I can actually pass on. So again, you can access that by coming up here to the framing layout, right click on it and find that alternate option for the custom style. While we're in the topic of framing layouts, you can see here I've got, if you look at my framing layouts, I got some labels overlapping each other. And that might be kind of, we've got some hanging labels overlapping this, joist rafter labels overlapping themselves. So different things that are an issue. So how can we improve that? And then one other thing you'll notice is that the underlying page image in this case is fairly dark yet. And so if I really didn't want that showing through so much, I could handle that. So this leads me to a couple other features that I wanted to show you that can help do that. Now, I think everybody, well, you may or may not be aware of this option up here, this label collision button. So you can see here, I've got labels overlapping, but if right before I do my framing layout, if I come here and I click on that automatic label positioning, it will go through and it will move those labels around to move them into spots where they're not overlapping each other, so you can see everything clearly. So there's one feature. And then down here is the page visibility. So I can slide this down, I can darken that or lighten it up. That way it's not showing through so brightly, and instead the drawing that I've made actually shows up. Now you may have already been aware of those, and so it's actually not so much those things that I wanted to show you. What I wanted to show you is that if you're in the habit of creating framing layouts, the way that you would really want to have your template set up is coming over here to the project tab and framing layouts. And you have two options up here on the framing layouts tab. One is this automatic labeling position button, which basically says anytime that I capture a framing layout, just do the label overlap function for me. You know, basically shove all the labels out as best as you can, rearrange them that way they're not overlapping each other. So it just does it for you automatically when you go to capture the framing layout. Secondly is this button here where you can choose to have the page visibility override. So this is saying whatever the page visibility, speaking of this down here, the slider bar, whatever the page visibility is currently set to, override it temporarily and set it to whatever I say here. You know, so if I in 25% usually works out pretty well. Could be a little bit brighter or darker or whatever, but so we'll set it around that area. But basically what this means is now whenever I capture framing layout, it's going to temporarily slide this and make this that lighter image. And then when it's done, it'll just put it back. So I'm not having to mess with this as I create framing layouts. So that would be something you'd want to do in your template file. So just to show you how that works, if I go to a different page, come back here. Okay, so I've got labels kind of messed up. If I was to do a framing layout and capture it here, there we go. And notice then as it does that capture, it lightens the image up for me. It does the label rearrangement function for me and moves those around. So something you'd want to do in your template file just to save you time and still get you to the cleaner output that you'd be looking for. Finally, one other thing related to framing layouts that I wanted to show you, again, kind of solving another way to solve some of that problem of overlapping labels. So as we look at this label, or we can just come back here. If we look at these, you know, of course, these labels are running right and left on the page. And then these ones are still running right and left on the page. So these kind of nest and stack nicely here, don't overlap each other, whereas these don't. So that's the default behavior where the labels are running always in a version where it makes it easy for you to read. But if your preference would be to have those labels run in a that really just follows the orientation of the member, that's an option over here in the profile, coming over here to profile tab and coming to labeling. On the left-hand side here, there's label orientation, and there's the option for the checkbox of follow member orientation. If I check this box and come back and take a look at the plan, now the labels are going to follow whatever orientation it is of that member. So you can see even on the diagonal here, it's going to follow the diagonal. And it's going to try to, as much as it's possible, you know, it's not going to put the label upside down for you. So, you know, it's going to follow generally. But then as you go to the perfectly straight up and down or close to perfectly straight up and down point, then it will kind of it will orient them all so they're pointed, the top of the text being on the left side. So again, in this case, for this drawing anyways, this tends to actually clean up any of that label overlap quite a bit. So you sacrifice a little bit of the easy to read ability, but in some ways it actually may be an improvement for you. So anyways, be aware of that setting, several different things that might relate to your framing layouts and other things that you're creating. Moving on from there, gonna jump over here to the different floor I've drawn here. And coming back up to the toolbar here in the digitizer, again, an area where there's some options for other custom items. So I'm going to select this area, and let's say I'm going to copy this. So I'm going to choose the copy or remember button, and I'm going to paste it, and I'll put a copy of it over here. And now, if you were thinking of this as units and maybe a larger commercial or high density project, you might need to copy a unit around and paste it different places on the plan. So I can select this, and then we've got the mirror and rotate functions up here, you know, so I can flip it this way, rotate it that way, you know, do whatever you need to, right, to get to position on the page. But what happens if it's actually at a 45-degree angle? You know, maybe you've got a wing coming off to the right-hand side, and part of this is drawn at a 45-degree angle. So notice again, we have these little triangles in the lower right-hand corner here, indicating there's more options. So if I wanted to rotate this at like 45 degrees, I can right click on it and find different options here to choose. So I could rotate at 45, you know, and then I'd be able to do a move and maybe, you know, pull this back over here And we have this going off at this 45-degree angle down here. So just be aware of when it comes to items on the page as you go to adjust them and rotate them. If you right click on these rotate options, you have abilities to go to more than just 90-degree turns and get to very specific. Another one on the topic of rotating relates to posts. And again, this maybe falls into the camp for some of you, you might not care so much because you're just going for a total materialist as opposed to the look. But I know for some of you, the look of your layouts and looking clean and nice is important to you. So when it comes to posts, so let's say I've got here a 4x6 post. If I do a draw more like this, this one's rotated pretty nicely for the wall. But if I was to have say a post over here, now this isn't actually oriented in the wall properly, it actually should be turned. And so if I right click on this, I can choose to come to angle, and I can change its counterclockwise to 90 degrees. And so now it's positioned there nicely in the wall like you would expect. If I was to draw that again and place it over here, like say in this wall right here, and now if I needed it to be at like a 45-degree angle, so now it's going to sit nicely inside of that wall again. So again, it's a little bit more fussing with it to an extent. And so for some of you, it's not going to matter, but for others, where layout precision and the way that it looks is important, just be aware of those options. Related to that, and maybe leaving the realm a little bit of only to make it look pretty, so to speak. But we might leverage that option a little differently in the case of, I'm gonna jump back over to our roof. You might remember last time we talked about some presets, the ability, one way of creating collar ties, a fast way of doing that. And so we did that here with a linear on center tool. Just draw some more off to the side here. And so we were arraying out, collar ties every 32 inches on the center. And it was a 2x8 and it's arranged nicely. And so as I go this way with it, you can see, well, that works nicely and you can see it, you can see the piece pretty easily, right? Pretty easy to find them. Whereas this way, it's like it's kind of buried inside of the orange line. You can still see them, but it's just not as clear. One approach to this might be to right click on this and come to your count angle and instead just set it like to a 45-degree angle. That way, no matter what direction that you actually draw it, as you go down along that line, whether it's vertical on the page, horizontal on the page, then it's going to be, showing it to you either way. So you could bake that into your preset. That way, no matter if the roof, the roof angles that you were aiming to draw were this way or that way, it was always really easy for you to be able to see, those specific items. And that might be even more so important to you if, in this case, we have the labels turned on. But if you had it set up so that labels weren't turned on, you just wanted to see the little bricks, then that would be even easier. So another tool at your disposal is the count angle that you can set for counts that are arrayed along a line there. Kind of running out of time here, and just as far as on the intent of keeping these things close. So actually, I'm not even going to get through everything I really wanted to touch on. So I'm just kind of looking through the rest here, and some of these I'll just save for next time. But I'm going to finish with just went over in reports. And maybe we'll touch on some reports more next time or in times coming up of some specifics about them. But a probably overlooked type of report that you're able to do, and this actually may fit well for some of you who do your takeoff and you send your material list over to your point of sale and it gets priced. And so you don't use these reports so much to give to your customer. And if that happens to be your role model or your workflow, one thing that you can still leverage is the notes feature. And if you're not familiar with the notes feature, I encourage you to get familiar with it. It's a pretty powerful tool that's been integrated into the system. But one of the things that you can actually create here is a report or a notes only report. So, if you're not going to use the rest of the material list because that's going to come out of your point of sale, just the way that you tend to organize things, I'm going to come to the notes and I'm going to say I want a notes only, no material included report. Click OK. And so if I was to view this report, now all the notes that I've generated for this, which also could include images, clarifying different things about the plan, decisions that you made, it'd be really easy for you to produce a PDF. There is no materials here. It's just can be a separate notes document that you could produce and be able to use in your discussions with your clients as you move things along and move it toward, a purchase or whatever. So again, just maybe a little less known type of report, and that way you would find that is if you create a new report up here in the upper left-hand corner, hit the plus button, come to the report format and choose the notes only report. So for that, I'll draw your attention to the Q&A section. Feel free to throw some things in there. We'll kind of keep that open here for a few moments longer if you wanted to engage in a couple questions, but we're gonna go ahead and stop the session for today. And with those items, and we'll be back again in a couple weeks to cover some more, and look forward to hearing you. And thanks for the feedback that you provided for us. We'll definitely review that and look to see how we can cover some of those topics as well in the upcoming sessions. So again, thanks for joining on today, and take advantage of the Q&A section here for a few minutes longer if we can help you out with something. Thanks again, guys. Talk to you later.